Well, welcome to Barston. We're here today. It's absolutely freezing, early December. We've come to try and catch a few skimmers and maybe a few F1s, and if we're lucky, a carp. I'm going to be using the pellet feeder today. It's a simple little method. It's great for sort of the winter months and when you want to feed less. It's a simple little device. Basically, you cram the feeders in like you would on a cage feeder. You fold a little short hook length in and bury it in. And basically, what happens is the hole's placed in the back and on the top of the feeder. The water gets around it and pushes the bait out. So you're left with your hook bait literally just in front of a small amount of feed. It's a really devastating method when it works. I have some great days here catching some F1s, you know, sort of 90, 80 pound weights of them. Could be a little bit harder today with the conditions, but I'm going to go through a few tips on how to make the most of a session on a pellet feeder. For today's session, I'm using the small 24 gram egg-safe pellet feeder, which simply has a smaller tube in it with the elastic that runs through. For today's session, I'll have 3 or 4 set up, so I can alternate hook baits and use different baits in the feeder as well. Hook length today, scaled right down. Normally on a venue like Barston, you're probably looking at 0.17, 0.19 hook lengths. I've gone down to an 0.15 hook length, to a tiny size 18 super NWG hook, to a micro band. And just scaling down just gets you those extra few bites, especially off the finicky skimmers. So that's the feeder for today, couldn't be any simpler. In the feeder itself today, I'm going to be feeding 1mm dynamite swim stim pellets and also the 2mm XL pellets. I'm going to simply dampen these down for a couple of minutes so they're nice and soft and they can go in the feeder. The reason why I use 2 different sizes of pellets is because I find it breaks down quicker. When you're using one size, they tend to clog up a little bit. So having 2 sizes, the water and the air can get between them nice and easy and push that bait out of the feeder a little bit quicker. So there's the 2 choices. Yeah. When it comes to places like Barston, I like to bring a range of hook baits because you're never quite sure what you're going to be catching. You could be catching the F1s and skimmers, or you could be catching carp. So I like to bring a range of baits with me. So to start with, I've got the faithful pellets. Just today's session, 4 and 6 mils, just standard hard coarse pellet, which can be really, really good here. I've also got, to go alongside them, which work really well for the skimmers, some soft 4 and 6 mil expanders. Again, I use a speed stop to put those on. They're a little bit more difficult to bury in the feeder. You have to be a bit careful, but a devastating bait in the winter months. Also, I've got some corn, nice bright hook bait, always works well in the winter. Love it for my winter carp fishing, so I won't go home without that one. And then moving on, I've got a range, different colour boilies. My favourite little good up squid ones there, sort of 8 and 10 mil, always worth a chuck with those on. And then finally, the ever faithful dead maggots. If nothing else won't get you a bite, these definitely will. For today's session, we're fishing the 2 sizes of pellets in the feeder. We've got 1s and 2s in there, just mixed up. But as a change, always like to bring a bit of ground bait. Just got a bit of ground expander in there with a few ground down pellets in. This is a great change bait with a single maggot on the hook. Just when the fishing gets a bit hard, sometimes they get a little bit preoccupied on the pellets. So fill in your pellet feeder, loading it exactly the same way with the ground bait, and just tucking a maggot or 2 in there will get you an extra bite. Loading the feeder is really important because you want your hook bait to come out with a little pile of bait in front, so it's important how you load it. Simply, all I do is scoop the pellets into the feeder first, holding the hook length out, and then once the feeder is full, just with your thumb, little press down, so you're making a place for the hook bait to go. And then simply fold the hook bait over. In this case I'm using a pellet, so I'll just give it a little squeeze into the bait that's already in there so it sits nice and flat. And then simply, to protect it on the cast, just cover it over with a few more pellets and then just give them a little press down. So the shovel's full there, and what I like is, I like it to think when the feeder hits the surface, a few pellets will come off as well and attract the fish down to the bottom as it follows down. But you know your hook length and everything's all tucked in nice, and then you let the water do the rest. The water will push through and push the hook bait and everything out into position. Hopefully get a bite pretty quick.